Yesterday, 12 news crews traveled to Nogales and crossed the border into Mexico to get a first look at how Mexico is reacting on their side of the southern border.
12 News journalist Bianca Bono was there, and Bianca, you had a very eventful day and early evening yesterday, especially when you crossed the border. You saw some very interesting things, right? You showed us, first of all, your cell phone, your camera stopped working, so you got on your cell phone and shot the whole live shot, which I thought was really neat.
We did it via Zoom at 6 o'clock yesterday, if you caught that. But yeah, it was really interesting because we were, spent the first half of our day on the Nogales, Arizona side of the border, but there was a lot of action happening south of the border on the Mexico side. It was super interesting because actually it was kind of perfect timing. Right when we got there, government officials with the Mexican government were setting up a migrant shelter at basically a huge sporting complex in Nogales, Sonora.
So you could see them doing this. Were they bringing supplies in? What were they doing?
It looked like they were staging supplies. It looked like there were like dozens of volunteers that were getting briefed by some sort of high-level government official on what potentially could happen. And that's all being put in place in the case of mass deportations happening on the U.S. side. They need to have a place for those, Mexican nationals to go once they're deported from the U.S. So they're picking communities really just south of the southern border, Nogales obviously being a big one, and setting up these huge migrant shelters so that way they're ready for these Mexican nationals if and when they do get deported from the U.S.
And you and your colleague, Yolanda, you both went down there. I mean, you actually saw a woman, right? Trying to scale the wall?
Yes, my photographer Nick Perez and I were doing an interview with a humanitarian group down there. So our digital journalist Yolanda Garcia, she was down there right at one of the pedestrian ports of entry in Nogales and saw a huge ladder get propped up on the Mexican side of the border. And lo and behold, a woman who had essentially a harness strapped to her climbs up over the.
There was
it's a
razor wire,
wall.
wasn't there?
There's razor wire, but they had cut a gap in it, probably about the size of my body.
Yeah.
They had cut a gap in it, and the woman essentially was lowered down onto the American side. She took her sweatpants off. She had leggings underneath, threw her sweatpants on the side, and then just took off. We're not sure if she then turned herself in. I would imagine not. But where she went after that, that was the only illegal crossing that we witnessed firsthand yesterday. But we did talk to some locals, a taxi driver that was kind of standing right there. He said that kind of thing does happen relatively often in that section of the border, and they do get creative and cutting the barbed wire. So I said this yesterday, but it'll be interesting to see if that type of activity increases, decreases.
Well, the turning yourself in is essentially over. That's turning yourself in and asking for asylum.
Exactly.
That's not going to work anymore. And I know we're out of time, but very quickly, Nogales is a massive port for importing and exporting, especially bringing in produce.
Yes.
So there's a lot of legal crossing of that border every
All
day,
day.
obviously. Yes.
All day. A lot of people actually who live in Nogales, Mexico, even send their kids to school on the American side of the border. So there's a lot of, activity that's legal that's happening all of the time. So that was really the only activity that we saw yesterday. Just south of the border, typically you see a long line of migrants who are seeking asylum. Monday, though, that's when they shut down the CBP One app. All of those people were told, hey, your appointments are canceled. They're not going to be rescheduled, so you have to go elsewhere. That's why shelters now in Mexico are being, filled up. And that's
stadiums
why,
too,
the
apparently.
stadiums too, and that's why it was so quiet on the Arizona side of the border yesterday.
Bianca, great work down there yesterday.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll continue that in the days ahead. Thank you.